Remember, during the election, Labour promised to spend 2.5% of GDP, the size of the whole economy, on defence in order to protect us. But will they tell us when they will keep that vow? You better keep watching. This Remembrance Sunday, the military is foremost in many months.
The fucking framing is just like, well, they're not doing it yet. When are you doing? When are you going to be committing to increasing that spending? And I'm just like, hang on a minute. When's the question going to come out? How are they going to fucking pay for it? What are they going to cut elsewhere to do it?
Yeah, exactly. When it's spending for schools, it's not, oh, you can do this next week, in a month's time? When are you doing it? Hurry up, spend the money on the schools. No, it's, how can we afford this? The magic money tray. No. Look, the framing of it is embarrassing. And again, manufacturing consent machine is burring with reckless abandon, frankly.
You heard a few moments ago the Chief of the Defence Staff in the UK challenging the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, to match the country's ambition with resources, to use his phrase. Admiral Sir Tony Radakin told us it was incredibly important.
The country's ambition to remain an imperialist power? Is that what you actually think the country wants? Not really. We'd quite like a functioning country, thank you. That would be cool.
To strengthen our armed forces. So will the government act? Darren Jones also joined us earlier this morning.
So our promise, as you know from the manifesto, was to reach 2.5%. We didn't set a date in the manifesto for two reasons. So in terms of where we are now, we're spending 2.3% as a country, the size of the GDP on defence. There was a boost of about £3 billion from the Chancellor in the budget last week. And John Healey, the Defence Secretary, in the reviewers will be reporting.
A £3 billion increase in the budget, that's more than the two-child benefit cap and the means test and the winter fuel payment fucking combined.
So between that increase in spending and the uncosted, potentially permanent money we're giving to Ukraine, we're spending $6 billion extra a year on defence stuff. Whereas we can't find $2 billion to feed children.
Literally, it genuinely makes me absolutely furious. At no point has anybody tried to offer this up as a trade-off that's been chosen to be made by the government. No media, no journalist, no interviewer, no commentator has gone, so you have chosen to put more money into defence at the expense of making pensioners freeze, which will happen, and making children starve, which will happen. We have the stats. Yet instead they said, oh, well, you're giving pay rises to doctors. And I'm just like, well, who do you think's going to treat the cold pensioners when they're freezing, right? It's going to be doctors. Yeah, unfortunately, a new aircraft carrier, that won't do shit for freezing pensioners or for starving children, unfortunately. Whereas the doctors are really fucking important.
Yeah, I like doctors and nurses and train drivers. They're useful. Bombs, not as much.
No.
I'm not saying they don't have any use, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have any of them. I'm just saying if it's that or freezing to death, what country are we defending here? Like, if the country's so shit that it's not worth defending, why are we spending money on defending it? Just to reiterate, in case anyone wants to spin it, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't help Ukraine. I'm suggesting that a government that says we can't make uncosted claims when it comes to feeding children shouldn't be making uncosted claims towards Ukraine with £3 billion a year in perpetuity.
Exactly. Like, if you want to talk about tough choices and difficult decisions about spending, and yet the axe falls on poor, starving children and freezing pensioners, and not indeed on military aid, then you've not made the correct choice, unfortunately. I'm sorry that you just haven't.
Just on that $3 billion that you raised, the former Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has pointed out that actually that is topping up money that's going to Ukraine. It's not going into the overall MOD budget. And he said essentially it actually works out as a cut in the overall budget. But just to press you on the date here, we've heard from the Chief of the Defence Staff this morning how important it is to do things like build up our stockpiles again. We've heard from countless experts in this field that we are in an incredibly dangerous moment. So I understand that there are reviews going on, but people want to know, when will you keep your promise?
Well, firstly, I think Ben Wallace is wrong, I think, from what you've said. I mean, the £3 billion uplift to the defence budget was in addition to the £3 billion grant to Ukraine, which continues each and every year in the forecast period. In terms of the money and how it's being spent more broadly, though, the Defence Department spends about £50–60 billion a year, and there's a big question about how that money is being spent and what it's being used to buy. And given that we have donated ammunitions to Ukraine, evidently that money will have to be re-geared towards buying back the capacity and the stockpile that we have as a country. But further money will be announced at a future fiscal event after the Strategic Defence Review.
But your own
I love how even their answer on this military spending thing, they don't even need to qualify because no other journalists will qualify the necessity of spending money on defence. It still has to go through the Quango. It still has to go through, we've got the Strategic Defence Review. We're going to get all these experts and technocrats in to have a little discussion about what's going to happen about the budget. And we need to all go through all of these different layers of bureaucracy first, which will cost money to do before we can decide how much money we want to spend, or even before we understand what we want to spend the money on even in the first place anyway.
colleague, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, has said that the military has been hollowed out. The Estonian Prime Minister, who's got Russia staring over his border and an unpredictable American president returning to the White House, says everyone has to pay more. So I'll ask you again, by when will you keep your promise? Can you even commit to doing it in the course of this Parliament by 2029?
So I'm not going to give you a date today because it relies on the outcome of the Strategic Defence Review, which will decide what the spending priorities
But you
are.
made the
Bureaucracy.
You made the promise during the election that you would hit that target. And today, our viewers will hear you're not even committing to doing it by 2029. You might not win the next election. So a commitment without any date at all is no commitment at all.
Well, the promise in the manifesto is a promise that will be met. You'll recognise there was no date set in the manifesto for the reasons I've set out.
But do you mean it will be met in the course of this Parliament by 2029?
As I said, I'm not going to give you a date today because we have to allow the Strategic Defence Review to conclude, which will inform our decisions about how much money we need to spend and what we need to spend it on, given changing geopolitical kind of affairs, but also the state of the defence services as we've inherited them from the last government.
But our viewers will hear this morning that you are not willing to even say that a promise you made in the manifesto will be kept by the end of your term in office.
Like, on both sides of the discussion, right? The journalist isn't the one saying we should be doing more austerity when it comes to defence spending. Darren Jones, literally said we're left with the state of the economy from the last government, right? That's the only allusion in this entire interview that we've had to the perilous nature of the nation's finances. And all the Kuenssbergers who go, well, you spend the money. Why won't you? You said you'd spend the money. We need more money now. Give us more government spending. Be fiscally reckless. And I was like, just for once, just do this with anything that's actually important, like money for disabled or poor people. For the for the love of God,
like,
I despise these people.
Yeah, they're ridiculous.
In any
other area of government spending, we'd have heard the phrase £22 billion black hole by now, and we have not.
Exactly. They would have immediately gone to a 22 billion black hole. We can't afford to. Unfortunately, we have to make tough choices and we have priorities here. And we need to actually put forward our domestic interests over trying to be the world police. And that, I think, really is closer to the median opinion than we need to be spending loads of money on the military regardless of the fiscal consequences of doing so, right? Not that I think there are particularly great fiscal consequences regardless. But the fact that that framing isn't coming from the journalists themselves, who spent the entirety of the coalition government, again, refusing to critique austerity and asking them to go further, or telling Jumbly Crumbly Concrete, the jam man himself, that his plans were fantasy and there's no magic money tree and we can't just spend money, even though we were in a liquidity trap where we needed to spend money to grow the economy, and we didn't do it, so the economy didn't grow at all. And now, but they won't even think about critiquing things in austerity terms when it comes to money for military spending. It's insane.
Yes.
I think viewers at home will recognise that you have to do these things properly. I can't give you a date today because the Strategic Defence Review has not concluded. That's an independent review being led by experts engaging with stakeholders.
The only framing of this to why they can't commit to it yet isn't even about the money. It's about the necessity of going through the Strategic Defence Review.
Yeah, no, we are going to piss away more money on something we don't need, but the exact way in which we piss it has not yet been decided by the technocrats who you don't get to elect. I love democracy. It's fun.
You could commit by what point you are going to meet your promise.
No, because it would be a half-informed answer, and I'm not willing to do that. You have to take these decisions in the most appropriate way. That's what you would expect of a responsible government.
But just to clarify, this is something that you promised in your manifesto.
Yeah.
Is it possible, therefore, by implication, that you will not keep that promise during your term in office by 2029?
So as we've now said for a third time, the manifesto said that we would reach 2.5% of spending on defence spending. It didn't set a date because there was more work that had to be done coming into government. You can't do that work in opposition because of the information being secret. And once the Strategic Defence Review is concluded in the spring...
Actually, that's not really true either, because you can do it on the basis of what is now King's Council. So you can actually get access to that information if you really wanted to, but you didn't want to because then you'd have had to have announced some shit.
You would have had to have given up on the explicit plan that they had, that Darren Jones shook his head out when it was being critiqued this by Ash Sarkar on Politics Live. Their plan of saying, we don't know anything, we have no plans that require tax rises to get into government with. Oh, we're in government, oh, everything's terrible, we had no idea that it was so bad, we have to raise taxes, rather than just being honest with the public and saying, yes, taxes do need to go up, this is a fact. I'm sorry, we're giving you hard truths, right? Yeah. But no, they had this dance that they had to do. And so, of course, the manifesto said nothing about it because then they would have to commit to a position they could be critiqued on during the election campaign.
Yeah. And
if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.